Hello, everyone. Welcome to ARM's public webinar series. We're just going to wait another minute or so to make sure everyone has a chance to connect. Thank you so much for joining us today. Fantastic. Okay, why don't we get started? Again, thank you for joining the ARM Exchange public webinar. Our topic today is on user-friendly automation and the future of work. We have a great panel lined up for you today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You will be placed on mute. And if you have any questions, please submit those in the chat feature of the GoToWebinar. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of our webinar within the time frame. We'll typically leave about 10 to 15 minutes available at the end for questions. So please make sure that you submit your questions. Just a little bit of background about ARM. ARM is the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Institute. We have a public webinar series that we open to members as well as non-members that gives you trends, insights, and expertise about advanced manufacturing. If you are a member of ARM, we also have a member webinar series in addition to these public webinar series for members. And we also have a online member community called the ARM Exchange that will also give you any insights, information about industry trends, and you also can access the status of projects that we fund. The ARM Institute is a national DoD-funded institute. We're the leading collaborative in robotics and workforce innovation. We currently have 290 plus members as part of our ecosystem. We're located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In fact, recently we just relocated our offices to Hazelwood Green, where we maintain a high bay, flexible labs, and office space. So what do? We provide funding for advanced manufacturing technology, as well as funding for robotics workforce solutions. We have a nationwide ecosystem, as I previously mentioned, and our ultimate goal is to help transition new technology to the factory floor. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the panel for today. We have Sudhi Bangalore. He's the CTO for Global Operations for Stanley Black Decker. We have Kel Gurin, who is the co-founder and CIO for Ready Robotics. And we have Aaron Prather, who is the Senior Advisor for Technology Planning and Research of FedEx. So thank you so much for joining us today on the panel. The moderator today is going to be Kyle Sassi, who is the EWD Project Manager here at ARM Institute. So thank you all so much for joining us today. So now just a quick, thank you, Cal. So now just a quick summary. I want each one of the panelists to talk a little bit about their organization and your role in robotics. So we will start with Sudhi on Stanley Black Decker. Sudhi, would you like to give us a little bit of background about your organization and your role in robotics? Make sure that you're off mute. Sudi? Okay, well, why don't we move to Cal at Ready Robotics, and we'll come back to Sudi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I didn't know it had muted me. Anyway, so excited to be here, and as the introduction said, I'm responsible for driving to the point you just made impact with all of our factories and DCs, and we have over 145 factories and DCs across the globe. And it's a global transformation that we're driving at Stanley Black Decker. And as part of that, robotics and automation is a clear opportunity for us in terms of how we actually leverage it to get more productive and to enable our workforce, replacing some of the dull and dirty technology. So excited to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We enjoy having you for today. Next is Ready Robotics. Kel, would you like to give us a little bit of background about Ready Robotics, if people are not familiar with your organization and your role in advanced manufacturing in robotics?
Definitely, and thank you for having me. So at Ready Robotics, we build software that makes it easier to use industrial robots and put together automation systems. We do that through a couple of different products, one of which is ForgeOS, which is a universal operating system for robots designed to work in an industrial environment. And we also have a very easy-to-use piece of software called Task Canvas that lets anyone be able to program a robot with very little training. That combined with educational and marketplace type resources, it's really sort of a one-stop shop for getting started with automation.
Fantastic. Thank you again for joining us today. And last but certainly not least, we have Aaron from FedEx.
Hi guys, thank you for having me for today's panel. My name is Aaron Prather. I'm with FedEx. A lot of folks know what we sort of do, and I just put a little bit of history up here of, we started back in 1973, and on our first day of operation, we had 389 employees, 14 aircraft, and 186 packages in our first sort. Well, that has drastically changed. Now we're over 600,000 employees, 650 aircraft, 16.5 million packages every day, and we touch 99% of the world's economy. So because of this, we have to automate to keep up. And that's what my team does here at FedEx, is we're tasked with automating as many of our systems as possible with robotics and advanced automation. And that's across our numerous product lines at Express, Ground, Freight, Logistics, Services, and even our office location has its delivery robots. So thank you for having me today at the Arm Institute's panel, and I look forward to this discussion.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move into the panel discussion, and Cal Fossey will be the moderator for this discussion. So I'll turn that over to you, Kyle.
Thank you for the introduction, Annette, and especially thank you for your work assembling and organizing such a tremendous panel. Thank you also to the panelists and all of our participants for your time and participation today. I really want to start things off by asking Aaron and Sudi if you could give a short overview on how automation has directly benefited your companies, and how you'd really advise a manufacturer that's looking to take those first steps into embracing automation. And then Cal, I'm going to bring you in for a second part on that.
You want me to go first, Kyle?
That'd be perfect. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, as I mentioned, we have a large swath of factories, and automation has not been new, and so has been robotics. So when we started this digital transformation, one of the things we wanted to do was to go beyond a spot exercise of deploying robots and related technology to drive some impact. Was just that, a local exercise. So the first thing we wanted to do was bring a little bit of process and rhythm to how robotics can be used to not only drive impact, more globally, but more important, get this fear out of people that it is a disrupting force for their own personal good, as far as career goals, etc. So the first thing we wanted to do was to dispel that myth. And so we started this journey starting somewhere about end of 2018, and we had several partners, including Ready Robotics, that we engaged with. And so we were able to very quickly get our first implementation that was built to scale more broadly than just a single plan. And then I'm happy to report that after 2 years now, it's a nice thing to watch. We have several plans that systematically now engages robotics in the right jobs, with a clear understanding of how we can then leverage that to drive impact, but also then to see how we can upskill and establish new career paths for our people that we're replacing with robotics. So those are the two big impacts that I see, that are very tangible. Is this building this local muscle, if you will, and then as part of that, making sure that that this is truly for the good of the people and that of the organization. We've been able to change that myth, shall I say.
Thank you, Sudhi. And Aaron, love to bring you in for your perspective from FedEx.
Yeah, I mean, at FedEx, depending on a package's trip through our network, it will have about 20 to 30 touch points. And what we started doing is we looked at each one of those touch points to see which one of the low-hanging fruit touch points were ideal for robotics and automation. And that's where we really started, is we went through our entire process. We came up with those specific touch points that made a lot of sense of those are the ones we want to go after. And that can be as simple as those touch points where somebody's just picking a package up and placing it into a scanner that then goes on to its next destination. And that's where we had a lot of our early successes. Also, just moving a package from one side of the facility to the other, because it may be too big for a conveyor belt. So we have our autonomous tugs that do that. And so when you look at manufacturing, this is the same thing we would tell manufacturers to do, is look at all of your touch points in your process and which one of those low-hanging fruit touch points are ideal. Is it as simple as just you need a part going into a CNC machine, or you need the part coming out of the CNC machine? Do you need to move material from one side of your factory to the other? Those are easy points to go after, regardless if you're a big company like FedEx or you're a small manufacturer.
I think that's a really important message, Aaron, and thank you for sharing that. Cal, I want to bring you in here because, Reddy, you're really positioned at the cutting edge of these technologies with your focus on the development of user-friendly automation. Could you briefly, and I know you touched on it in your introduction, but could you briefly define what user-friendly automation is and how it's going to start removing some of the barriers for manufacturers to start adopting automation?
Absolutely. So when we talk about user-friendly automation, we really talk about where the technology of putting together an automation cell is drastically easier to use. Typically, in order to put together a robotic cell, you have to be an expert at using whichever specific robot you use. That requires learning a specific programming language, and then understanding how to plug all of the different components that the robot then works with to actually do useful tasks like grab objects, see them with cameras, things like that. So all of that different technology has traditionally been very difficult to use because it's mostly been people like controls engineers and robotics experts who have been deploying it. Well, as Sudhi and Aaron said, the demand for automation has been increasing. And so getting people who are not experts at automation the skills to put together an automated system is something we specifically work on, and that's really what our technology is about. So you build software that makes both the programming aspect of robotic automation drastically easier. We're talking about days of learning instead of months of learning in the traditional sense. And also our software, Forge OS, allows you to very easily put together the pieces of an automation system, right? When you buy a laptop, you don't think twice about plugging a mouse into it and expecting it to just work, right? Well, that's because somebody like Microsoft has done a huge amount of work to make those components seamlessly work together. We're doing the same in the robotic automation side. So I don't need to know a lot about a gripper or the robot. I can just plug them together and they work the way I expect them to. And to Aaron's point about low-hanging fruit, what this does for organizations, it allows them to get started with automation much faster. Because automation used to be so difficult, it used to really be limited to projects that were worth it, right? It had to be a large project, a complicated process to make it worthwhile to put all this effort into automation. Now that there's easier to use tools to rapidly put an automation work cell into a factory, you can look at those low-hanging fruit and say, hey, that task over there would be great if we had a robot doing it. Let's take a day and actually put a robot there and be using an automated cell to do that process. That type of velocity is possible now because of easier to use technology.
Appreciate that, Cal. So I'm picking up on three main messages here. So the technology is getting a lot easier for manufacturers to use. Manufacturers should be really looking at some of those quick wins and high touch point areas to adopt automation. And then Sudhi, you brought up a really great point that as these technologies are integrated, that human case and the worker benefit of these technologies increases dramatically. So I really appreciate your insight on this question. Moving on to our next one, and Sudhi, I'd like to go to you first on this, is to talk a little bit about that process for adopting automation technologies, specifically around how the skill requirements for different positions may have changed. And as you brought up in the first question, how your company's support strategy for new automation changed as well. So I'd like to go to you first and then Aaron for this one.
Sure. So if you go back to what Aaron was saying, our starting point for robotics was how can we use it to replace dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks? So like machine tending, which can sometimes be a hazardous affair. You handling these parts and then feeding it into the machines. So it started with that. We also called spot automation. So that was our starting point. But then while doing that, then one of the things we were deliberate with was to show and articulate how the jobs that we were replacing, the people there in those jobs could take on additional roles. In fact, Kel was privy to the first project we engaged in Ohio, and it all started actually with a very clear dialogue, a deliberate dialogue by one of my leaders who came from GE, by the way, and he actually had a conversation with him saying, what do you think, what's going to happen to, because he was managing, I think, 4 or 5 stations at that time overall. So long story short, it started with that conversation, and then he had his own reservations about the technology we were deploying, but making sure that we had a clear communication with this gentleman who was getting displaced with his task. We were able to actually make him a passionate believer of not only being able to eventually in a few months be able to program the cells there, but he was one of the most constant caller into Ready Robotics, coming up with changes, etc., and requests to see how he can make the job better. So of course that's a fantastic story, and not all stories are that perfect, but the point is that the points I'm trying to make is you got to be deliberate in terms of talking to the people and saying, you know, these are the opportunities, these are the pathways you can take. Maybe it is now to program the robots, or maybe it is you now helping create an educational class for other people who'll be displaced with technology. So there are many ways we can engage. And third, most important, a lot of these people had great, you know, machining skills, etc., and programming CNC machines. They pretty much have lost the trade because, or touch with that, because they've been so busy doing mundane activities. So you can actually pull them back and bring it back to their core expertise, which is much higher value than tending to a machine. So those are some of the different career paths that we have at least identified, and we start that as an opening position and saying, hey, here are some of the things you can do. Where is your head? And then we make sure that we provide mechanisms to then help train that person and support that person to the evolution into this into this new journey. So that's how we've approached it.
That's great. And that communication piece to the worker, that's really key and phenomenal on your end that you're prioritizing that.
I do want to add one another thing. A lot of what I said from my experience, you at SPD and before, is done as part of change management. For the most part, what I've seen this to be is a clinical exercise, an exercise that consultants, nothing against consultants, somebody then prescribes what change management ought to be, and you approach it and you deliver that change management, which works. But what's critical is you have to empathize, you have to care about that role. So you need to find people who truly care for the ones who don't have the college degree and who don't have even maybe a high school diploma. How do you really now excite these people and take them into a journey which is a lot more exciting than doing the mundane task? And to do that, you need to care.
Great point. Aaron, love to bring you in here too.
Yeah, I mean, back to Sudi's point, I mean, I started at FedEx 25 years ago while still in college, and I was offloading trucks on the weekend for money and actually FedEx's tuition reimbursement. So I started where many of these folks started. So my team always has taken the approach of we start with the employee. We start with how are you currently doing the task? What would you like to not do in the task? And then that's where we start identifying those touch points that we really should go after to automate, because the employees are just not liking doing that. They don't want to stand there for a 4-hour shift inducting package after package after package. So when we brought them the first prototype of many of our robots and showed them how it was going to do it, we got more feedback from them than we did from our own engineers in most cases. This is what I needed to do. And that's how we started building most of our applications in these spots, is actually listening to the employees of what were the tasks that they just didn't want to do, and then actually then being alleviated from those tasks to go do other tasks that were actually more critical. Case in point, in the operation that we put most of our pick and place robots, one of the big areas that they needed to actually more focus on was address correction, because we were having packages that were just being misaddressed by our own customers. So the value is we took those employees off the line to then address those packages and make sure that they got to those proper destinations. And our customers are none the wiser of what had took place to get their packages to them, but there could have been a serious problem if we could not have moved those people from the dull task of inducting packages to the very much more important task of solving why is this address not popping correctly in the system, and fixing it right there for the customer and getting the package to them on time. So you do need to have your people on board right away. And the other great thing that we're starting to see created as more of our robots are rolling out is the creation of a new job pretty much called robot team leader, where a team leader is running a group of robots that used to be other employees, but now they're tasked with running all those robots. So they're taking care of the robots, they're starting them up each day, they're monitoring, they're taking care if a problem comes up, and then they're shutting them down at the end of the night and going home. And those folks love those jobs. Actually, I get more requests for folks that want to get into that role now than I've seen in any other position. So automation is great, robotics are great, but if you keep the people on board, you're going to go a lot farther.
I think that's a fantastic point that you both bring up, that communication to the worker, not just important because it broadens their career outlook, increases their relationship with the company, but it also leads to a better and higher value integration of the system, because you understand what the pain points in that role are. So Cal, I want to bring you in here to talk a little bit about how Ready Robotics is really rethinking and changing the skills required for robotic programming.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the common theme that I think we just heard is really about ownership. And when we think about automation technology in the past, it's very much been something like, hey, you were previously running this machine, we're going to automate that work cell, so you're going to go do something else, right? And in the new world where we have, where this technology is much easier to use and much more accessible, that means that the people who were previously doing those tasks, which have all of that, domain knowledge, right? The gentleman that Sudhi was talking about, who was, programming those machine tools for 30 years, he knows better than anyone how to get the best product out of those processes. He needs to stay involved in the automation process. And like Aaron said, he can ultimately end up being somewhat of a robot manager where he's managing all these different systems. But that doesn't happen unless the underlying technology is accessible to him, where he can walk up to it, understand it, and then go, okay, this is a tool I can use to make what I do better. That leads to a level of ownership that makes the conversation and the change management that Sudhi was discussing much easier, because the employee is already on board that this is just a transition to them being more valuable for the organization and them moving on to more interesting work than sort of, hey, this robot is going to be there and that's it, right? So why we focus on the ease of use is really about empowering the people who are already doing these tasks, who can be doing other things with their expertise, again, going back to their roots and what they're really good at and really there for, which are these difficult tasks that we can't really automate. But that doesn't happen unless the underlying technology, and specifically the software they use to interact with these robots, is easy, is something that they can walk up to and learn and own.
Hey, Carl, would you mind if I add another critical point? So taking intimidation out of technology, that's what Cal was talking about. It's very important. I forgot to mention another base premise here. These things that we talked about works really well when there's growth, okay? So when there's growth in the business, all of these wonderful things happen. Because in fact, I was in our DC yesterday, right here in Charlotte, and we're putting in some amazing automation that used to be super cumbersome, where we basically sort our packages, very similar to what Aaron was saying. But long story short, one of the things he was talking about was how his own people embraced automation because they knew that we were just bursting at our seams, we were becoming inefficient, and we don't have enough people. We have literally tens and thousands of jobs open right now at Stanley Black Decker that's not fulfilled. So it's still a tough market in manufacturing. So where I'm going is all of this will really work when you have growth on your side. So because people know they can get to better jobs. If on the other hand, if there's no growth and all you're doing is displacing people with automation, then I think that business is a larger problem. So I just wanted to point that out.
It's a great point you bring up, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about training and ways to fill some of those employment gaps that we're seeing. For this next question, Cal, I feel bad because I've gone to you the past two, so I wanted to bring you in first on this one to just talk a little bit about how automation has redefined the manufacturing floor. And once those technologies, and this is the point Sudhi was bringing up earlier, once those technologies have been integrated, how is the perception of employees changed? So Cal, I'm going to bring you in first, and then Aaron, I'm going to go to you, and then Sudhi at the end.
Right. So I think that we've seen, and Sudhi sort of brought it up, right? There is a massive skills gap in manufacturing. There's a huge glut of unfilled positions because we just can't find people skilled enough to do those jobs, which sort of lends itself to automation, because we say, well, we can automate those positions and fill that capacity that's missing for businesses to stay competitive. The problem is that results in needing people who are experts in automation to actually deploy those systems. So it's this sort of vicious cycle, right? By bringing in easier to use automation, what we've seen on the factory floor is we've seen, as Aaron said, a lot of low-hanging fruit tasks very quickly automated. And then what a factory can do is look at those, and a larger institution is look at those wins and go, okay, our workers were able to upskill on this very fast. We were able to put these systems in place very fast. The return on investment, because of the decreased implementation and training costs, was very high. So how do we think more largely, as an organization about how we deploy automation in a more holistic fashion? And that's where the other part of our business comes in as well, when we talk about having an operating system that works with any robot, Forge OS. And the reason for that and why it's important is a lot of companies have a lot of different robotic hardware. Stanley is a great example because Stanley is a conglomerate of a lot of other smaller businesses that have sort of been wrapped together. And they may have factories that have robots from different manufacturers. And when they look at those initial wins, those successes with automation, and they look at the rest of their organization, they go, okay, well, I want to be able to do the same thing over in this factory, and it's the same process, but I have a different robot. Now I have to retrain people, et cetera, right? So having a common platform, having the technology be flexible so that it can work in either of those situations means now that they can sort of consolidate knowledge around their entire automation strategy. And they're not going to be worried if a different factory has a different robot, et cetera. So it allows an organization to think more holistically. And then for the workers, they, again, feel empowered that they're being part of that very positive change for the organization, both at the floor level, where previously they were putting a piece of metal into a machine and now they're running 5 robots that are doing the same thing, to an organizational level where you have factory managers who are looking at a fleet of robots in a factory and very much understanding how they're working and the value proposition behind them and how that growth happens. So it's a very positive change that can accelerate through an organization very rapidly.
Really great point. Aaron, and I imagine you're seeing very similar things at FedEx.
Yes, I would, to build off what Kel just said, is I think we're also seeing 2 dynamics here. Is as companies identify this low-hanging fruit in their processes, and they pinpoint those, what we're also seeing through companies like Ready is they're bringing down that training gap and being able to make much easier user-friendly automation processes come along. I'll use palletization as probably the best use case that I see across numerous industries. Everybody's building pallets of boxes that are leaving their warehouse or their factory, and the palletization programs that are out there are very simple to use. Ready has done palletization, numerous other companies. So the whole thing is that you have very simple training now to go after that low-hanging fruit. And that's also now a great place then to start, is if you can match 0 training credits, practically, types of training with a great low-hanging fruit use case, boom, you're now off and running. And this starts bringing your people in to start looking around, like, oh, wait a second, we have all these other use cases here. But that early win, that nice, easy win, has brought your whole team on board, where now they can go explore those other things. And back to Kel's point, if you got that palletization win at one of your factories and they're using one robot, but now you have another robot at the other one, it's like, it doesn't matter. Ready has made a program that will work on both for you. And now you can go get that one and get that team on board. So this is where I think folks need, this is what's really critical for especially small and medium manufacturers in this country, is if you can find that quick win somewhere on your floor and find a technology that has that 0 credit hour, like I can do this really fast and train my folks, and get those aligned and that win going, you're gonna start seeing a lot of progress in other spaces too.
That's great, a great point. Sudhi, I want to bring you in here. You've talked a lot about how these technologies have impacted Stanley Black Decker, so I'd welcome you, in addition to talking more about that, broadening that to how you see all of these technologies and some of those 0 credit or quick skill development training having an impact on the entire U.S. manufacturing base.
Yeah, so along the lines of what Aaron was saying, I could think of a parallel in a slightly different way. So when you have local plants take the ownership of finding opportunities to make their lives better, it's a wonderful first step. And so when we did that, and then we had a local champion then was responsible for all of the Midwest, going back to the example I mentioned that we had with Ready, then what they did was they started getting super creative of how to apply it in different use cases, like Aaron said. So suddenly now you have a nice flywheel effect happening, that it's no longer just about robotics. Maybe you're using software and you're using Power BI apps to do other things. So suddenly they started building neat systems on their own, which started out as just a robotic exercise. Now, fast forward that, the way we are approaching it is, we started with spot automation. Then we said we're going to go with connected automation, then in platform automation. What it essentially means is, where we are now is, now that we've got a little bit of momentum in deploying these less complex solutions around robots and automation systems, we're now looking to do bigger and better things. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, we're bringing capacity from, especially in China and Southeast Asia, back to the US and Mexico. And to do that, you have to be very cost competitive, obviously, right? So one of the things we're now doing is doing innovation around, how do you take the cost down out of automation? How do you bring more software into automation, which makes flexible changeovers a lot more doable, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not just one company that's doing it. We've got a bunch of companies that are participating in that. Why this is important for not just Stanley Black Decker, so we can, in our case, for power tools, we want to make Charlotte, which is already a big plant for us, the biggest plant. We want to make that a flagship for all of North America, including moving capacity from maybe even Mexico, which means local jobs. So this is now super important, not just for us, because we're going after driving the cost of automation down, and also shrinking the time it takes to build automation like this. It would take 1.5 years for these lines. Now we want to shrink it down to maybe 6-7 months, if that. So that means a big deal. So if you combine these two components, delivery and time innovation and cost innovation, working with a bunch of companies to accomplish that, I'm absolutely up to what Aaron was saying. We really can serve the industry so much better with some of these innovations, where we as a larger company are taking the leadership stance and investing, improving some of these technologies. I think if more companies can do that, that'll be outstanding, because now you truly are making the US based a lot more cost competitive, and it's the right kind of jobs too. So that is where we are now. So we are really in step 3 from the point I just described when we kicked off this conversation.
Thank you, Sudhi. And I think, oh yeah, go ahead, Cal.
Sorry, I just want to jump in, because Sudhi brought up a really good point that I would encourage companies to think about when they're thinking about their automation processes, to think about things from a scalability standpoint, right? And that's really what allows, and from a strategy standpoint, because that's what allows a company to go from a spot installation to sort of a country or a global strategy. And it's something, and seeing that transition and how companies have, like Stanley, have wanted to do that and have done that, that has influenced our business a lot. When we got into this, it was very much about usability, right? Because as we've discussed, the ownership of the user who's using the technology is paramount. But as we started working with companies and seeing how they wanted to very quickly scale, that shaped a lot of our product roadmap. The newest version of software that's coming out in a few months here is a much more connectivity-focused product. It's very usable as well, but it's also making it so that all of these different pieces that you might need at a much larger scale, at the factory level or at the institution level, those plugins are also just as easy to put together, not just the pieces of metal, but also your MES system or your dashboard or whatever data type platforms you use. All of that needs to go together too. So it's been really interesting to see how the needs of companies have changed as they go from a single operation to a sort of a larger strategy.
Thank you for adding that, Cal. And Sudhi, back to your point, I think over the past year, we all kind of see the need to have a strong US-based manufacturing base. So I want to kind of transition the conversation a little bit from benefits of automation and how companies can start to look at it to more the training end and supporting a lot of this activity. So as you know, ARM is a broad-based consortium with stakeholders from industry, technology development, academia, government, organized labor, et cetera. How can we all be doing a better job of supporting industry's adoption of automation and also supporting individuals that are looking to pursue careers in the field? So Aaron, I want to go to you first and see if you have any advice for SMEs or any other kind of stakeholders in ARM's network.
Yeah, I mean, being a big corporation, we have a large training program, and so we were allowed to do some in-house. But when it comes to small and medium manufacturers, that's not really going to be a case of you can have a large training department. So one of the strategies we even use here at FedEx is we team up with our local academic institutions. And that could be anyone from here in Memphis, the University of Memphis, Rhodes College, Christian Brothers University's 4-year colleges, down to the community colleges that we have locally that are in their programs, all the way down even to just smaller operations. Best one I can think of is eCammy in Paintsville, Kentucky, in rural Kentucky, which is training former coal miners how to be robot technicians. So as an SME, you really need to tap into your local ecosystem of who are those potential academic partners, regardless if they're a big institution or a small institution, that you can team up with to provide the skills that you know you're going to need to hire from. Because that's one of the big things in academics right now is sometimes they just don't know what employers are looking for. And if you don't have those relationships built, you're going to struggle. So I always recommend go down to the local academic institutions. I know most deans are going to open their doors wide to you, or any director at these educational institutions, and tell them, this is the kind of skills I'm looking for my facility. What do you have? And if they don't have it, come up with a plan. We have a standing meeting here in Memphis with all the educational institutions, not just FedEx, but all the other local companies, of saying, these are the skills we're going to be looking to hire for. So I highly stress that. And I know that sounds like an extra burden, but the payoff can be huge. And I know the ARM Institute's doing a lot of work in this area to make that a little bit easier to find those local folks. So, but that's where I would really start. Thanks,
Aaron. And I'm going to take your opportunity to tag some of the work that ARM's doing on this front. So we're launching, as many of you know, a asset management system, an asset map of the country's training programs in March of this year. So it's called roboticscareer.org, and it's really meant as that tool for employers to understand training programs in their regions that already meet some of the needs that they're looking to develop further, but also for workers and people that are looking for education in these careers. So Sudhi, I'd love to go to you next, and maybe you could share a little bit about the work that you're doing in Hartford with Stanley Black Decker's Advanced Manufacturing Training Center.
Right. So along the lines of what Aaron said, as well as Cal, I want to connect the two dots. If you heard what Aaron was saying, was let the local institutions, be it a community college or a 4-year university, help you out. And then the other point was about SMEs. But if you really think about that, the SME piece, they're, in my opinion, an underserved market because they are very myopic about keeping their business running. And so they don't have a lot of bandwidth to go experiment, nor do they have the capital and the and the resources to go explore certain things, right? That could be viable. So I think what we're doing, so there's a big opportunity in connecting the dots with what the small to medium businesses want. Provide those SME segments and their users with technology that suits their business. In other words, lightweight technology, lower cost, easy to implement. So what we are doing is we're taking the technology, so this goes beyond robotics, okay? Robotics is just one aspect of it. So we're taking technology that we have deployed in our factories. We're now engaging with our own suppliers. We have more than 1,000 suppliers, more than few thousand suppliers, but you're whittling it down to a smaller number. But so what we're doing is we're actually enabling and proof of concepting how we can make our SMEs a lot more productive. So when they get more productive, we get benefits. So it's not always a price game where we keep pushing them on price, right, for their products. So now that we're building some expertise with SMEs, with our own SMEs, now we're engaging with a lot of the academic institutions and the local organizations like CCAT, for example, in Connecticut. So what we're doing is, hey, here's what small to medium business needs, we see as needs. And so we have some technology set. We might have to fine tune that to suit the industry makeup in Connecticut, which is mainly aerospace. It happens to be that, a lot of aerospace type in defense and aerospace. And so now if we can fine tune it to that industry, and now the educational institutions can actually take that and not only help develop training curriculum, but also start teaching courses around technology to truly matter. So it's not an esoteric type of training exercise, but it's more special purposed towards technology that will get deployed into your own SME segment in your own state. So that we think is a really good recipe of connecting the dots. So if you have a passion for technology, you have a passion for an underserved segment like SME, connect institutions that's getting a lot of funding from the federal, and local state governments, make their training a lot more purposeful, then I think we'll have a really nice equation that can then be copied and pasted into multiple states, not just Connecticut.
That's a great message as well. Cal, I'd love to bring you in on this one, and then I'm going to try to get one more question in before we move to our Q&A from the audience.
Lost him completely, huh?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, not sure what happened there.
Oh, no problem. If you'd like to add anything to this point, feel free to. If not, we can also move on to the last question.
No, that sounds great. I mean,
Okay.
I think that for the most part, when we think about how our software lowers the barriers, it really comes back to what Aaron was talking about in terms of working with these local institutions. And we have a lot of educational aspirations as well, working with these local institutions to prepare them to prepare employees for these types of positions, right? Because a lot of the local universities, local community colleges, trade schools, things like that are the ones who are preparing individuals to enter into the manufacturing space. And in that way, we need to make sure that they are using the most usable technology possible, because then they can really focus more on how the industrial tasks are actually done with these systems rather than just how the tools are used. So we're trying to support those local organizations that end up being the sort of lifeblood partners that Aaron was discussing.
Thank you. I'm going to try to get one more in, just a quick question here, but we really want to end on a positive note here. And I think you've all made a really tremendous and compelling case for the enormous opportunity and benefits of these technologies. In order to kind of broaden who benefits from them, I wanted to ask, and also helping with a lot of the issues of filling job openings, I wanted to ask really quickly, just how have your organizations reached out to non-traditional audiences like veterans, transitioning military, and their family members, women, minorities, incumbent workers that are maybe underemployed? So maybe we could really quickly hit that, and then we'll move into our Q&A from the audience. Aaron, how about we go with you first?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like veterans, FedEx has a very strong outreach to the military. Actually, many of our pilots are ex-military because their training it makes them ideal for flying at night. It doesn't take a long leap for that for some of those military pilots. But the whole thing is that's one thing that actually, when it just comes to veterans overall, they come out of the military with a skill set that is ideal for joining FedEx. Their adaptability, to a changing environment. That's what we deal with all the time. And then when it comes, we have strong outreach programs. Actually, I'm proud to say that actually we have broken the world into 3 regions: the Americas, Europe, and Asia. And 2 of those regions are run by women. And that is something we are very proud of in the logistics industry. Is we have numerous female leaders in our company, and this is just something that we know as going forward as a company that we need everybody on board. The demands of e-commerce continue to grow, and anybody and everybody that wants to join Team FedEx, we're going to take them, and we don't care your background, race, creed, color. Everybody on board. We all bleed purple here.
Thanks, Aaron. Sudhi, would you like to add to that?
No, I think it was covered. We have a very similar focus. All of the ERGs that Aaron mentioned, they're very active, and we collaborate very significantly with NAM and also other companies such as Rockwell Automation that has a very active veterans program, a training institute, Advanced Manufacturing Training Institute. So this is really close to us as a company and to a lot of myself and my team.
Thank you. And Cal, you've talked a lot about how your technology is kind of opening the door for more people to get involved in these careers. I'd love for you to put a pin in it or capstone on it, or whatever the term you want to use, and then we can move into our Q&A.
Sure, and I think really it comes down to how vital manufacturing is and what opportunities there are in manufacturing, both at from the standpoint of people who could potentially fill those unfilled jobs, but that also from all of the other technologists out there who could potentially be developing solutions that solve problems in manufacturing. And that's really been our focus, is focusing on the usability side, so that anyone, somebody from the military who just got out and now they don't know anything about robots, but they have an amazing skill set that they could leverage and be able to work in a manufacturing environment and have that opportunity. And then other people out there like software developers will be able to develop applications with our products, which will let them, they're out there developing a web app or something like that, but they see manufacturing, they see that there are problems that they can solve, and now they have a way in to solve them. So it really is about, for us, it's about making sure that manufacturing is understood as a vital area that everyone can contribute to and solve problems in.
Thank you, Cal. That's a great note to end on. Sudhi, Aaron, and Cal, thank you again for your time. This was a really tremendous discussion for me to sit in on. I hope our audience found it as illuminating as I did. Annette, I'm going to toss it back over to you to manage any questions that are coming in through the chat.
Sure. Thank you so much. Really appreciate, and I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion. We have a lot of questions. I'm sure we will not be able to get through all of them, but if we don't address your question, we will definitely forward them on to our panelists, and they'll respond to you via email. One of the first questions is for Aaron, and it asks, does automating the low-hanging fruit reduce costs by displacing labor, or does it benefit the company by increasing productivity and throughput?
It's a little bit of both. You get productivity gains, and you're not, technically paying a person to do that task anymore. But the whole thing is, as I said, we have no one at FedEx has lost their job due to automation. If anything, we are actually gaining on the other skill sets as we take those folks out of the dull, dirty, dangerous jobs and put them into other jobs of getting the package to the right place. There's a lot of stuff that goes into moving a package across the country. And it's being able to put those people in those problem-solving skills has actually helped increase the productivity of those folks. So yes, we are picking a person up and placing them into another job role, and they're no longer doing that role. But productivity has actually started going up. Actually, as I stated before, when I started at FedEx 25 years ago at the Memphis hub, which is the main hub for the Memphis hub, there was about 4,000 employees that worked that facility. Today, there are 4,000 people that still work that facility, but it does 3 times as much volume. So give and take. So the whole thing is we're seeing both.
Right. Okay, fantastic. Okay, now this question is open to anyone that would like to answer. What are the top skills that the new robotics engineer or enthusiast should aim for?
I can take that one.
Sure.
So what we actually look for the most, and I think this is something that Aaron and I have actually had a conversation about, is problem-solving skills. Because the ability to use and work with automation systems, as I said, all of those pieces of software that you typically have to have a sort of deeper knowledge of, you don't anymore. You can just learn it, and it doesn't matter if you're a coal miner, like we work with at ECAMI, one of the institutions that we talked about, or if you're an engineer, right? It doesn't matter. You're still learning the same thing and doing the same thing. But what is the difference between success and failure in an automation task is things are going to arise, problems are going to be need to solve, and you're going to have to come up with creative solutions to get this robotic system, which is a fairly fixed and limited device compared to a person who's capable of doing all sorts of crazy things. You're going to have to find the best way to get that automation system to do the task that previously a person was doing. And that takes a huge amount of creativity and a huge amount of problem solving skills. So that's really the key area that someone needs to be good at in order to succeed in that space.
Okay. We have a question.
And I would just add the whole of improvise, adapt, overcome. Going back to why we like having veterans, that's a motto, and that's what you really need to be. I mean, if you can adapt and problem solve, I don't care what your background's in, you're gonna make it far.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. For Sudi, can you describe a little more detail what the difference is between spot versus connected versus platform automation?
Sure. So spot automation is where you take an operation like what I mentioned, whether it is an inspection, for example, or palletizing or machine tending. These are spot automation. Typically, it's done in one cell, and so that's spot automation. Now, if you can connect that particular cell into something larger, which is now maybe it is an assembly system that gets connected with some intelligence that the connected, the assembly is working, then and along with maybe a software analytics app running on top of that, that is a connected solution. And now the third, which is matrix to scale, as we call it, which goes beyond spot and connected, is platform automation. Now what we're looking at is to not only build a product, in our case, maybe power tools, but it also how that system now connects to the DC, connects to the mini mart that actually provides all of the material to the building of the product and all the way to shipping back to the DC. Then that becomes a full platform, right? And so it has multiple technology components connecting all together, and we put it all together in the right way with the right design. Then you drive all kinds of impact, not just productivity, but also lead time reduction, less work in process, and on and on. So those are that's a quick description of the 3 different types of automation types.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what would you say is the biggest application in your business? This might go more towards Aaron and Sudi. What is the biggest application in your business that currently is not being solved by robotics? That might be another area that you might want to move towards.
I'll let Sudi answer first on this one.
I think it's really types of operation. Cabling still continues to be a very tough operation to automate, whether it's in the aerospace industry or semiconductor electronics, and in our case, power tools, assembly. Cabling is a tough nut to crack. And also even though the other operation that is harder is gluing and screw driving operation in certain tight applications. So the way I would respond to that question is it's certain type of operations that are harder than others that make it expensive and not viable to do these applications. But it's also, as I said, the big deterrent is cost, because cost is still a big deal if you go beyond just the spot automation. So if you can actually innovate around cost, there's several ways we can do that, and companies are exploring those angles. That really can unleash a new wave of adoption with this whole robotics and automation technology.
Okay, and Aaron?
I would just say we still have so much diversity of product in our systems that some robot applications are not going to work. Case in point, we get mufflers, we get hockey sticks, we get weird stuff that just comes down our belt. I have not been able to figure out a robot that can pick up all that diverse product and move it to the next point. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space going forward. And we are addressing those by, again, breaking down the entire process and seeing where can we pick up that process apart and add it. When it comes to those big, bulky, weird shaped stuff, everyone's ordering sofas now online. Thank you very much. We can't pick it up with a robot, but we can definitely transport it across the warehouse floor. So we're looking for that low-hanging fruit again. But that's where I'd say it's just we deal with a lot of different product.
Understand. Well, great. Okay, well, we're going to end here. There were more questions. I will send those to you all so that you can respond directly to the audience. And if you have any other specific questions and you'd like to reach out to the panelists, on the screen, you can see their email address. So please feel free to reach out to any of our panelists. So we're going to end the webinar today. Thank you so much all for joining. Please answer the short survey that's right after this event ends. We would like to have your feedback. If you're interested in our ARM membership, please contact us at membership@arminstitute.org. So with that, I'd like to thank each one of our panelists, Sudhi, Kel, Aaron, and Kyle. You did an awesome job. Thank you all so much for taking the time to speak to our audience.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.